and welcome to the Group 4 presentation involving the Apple supply chain case study we all read together, and one particular event involving Apple Inc. and the company GT Advanced Technologies. GT was a company that was mentioned in our case study that we all read together. They entered into a deal with Apple, which was proved to be very lucrative, or at least believed to be so initially. The case study did not go into the ultimate events that occurred with this particular transaction, so we will complete that story today. We will be talking about how Apple works with their supply chain. We will be talking about the deal Apple struck with GT Advanced Technologies. We will be talking about the impacts of that deal and the fallout that eventually happened. We'll mention a couple of other events that were very similar to this in the technology industries. And finally, we will give our recommendations as to how Apple should move forward in this sort of deal in the future. Let's get started. Supply chain management at Apple. Apple, they don't work like many companies where they go out and flip through a catalog trying to find the right part that they could use for their iPhone. No, they work with companies directly ahead of time, purchasing full capacity of those companies to produce products custom designed for their technologies. This results in many exclusivity deals with the companies they work with. This results in lower costs per part than Apple would have to pay if they were buying out of a catalog. Let's talk about GT Advanced Technologies and what deal Apple went in with them. In fall 2013, Apple contracted with GT Advanced Technologies to produce one specific part for their iPhone. This would be an optical sapphire display for the next generation of the iPhone. In return for developing and producing this display, Apple would provide $578 million to GT over 4 payments prior to receiving these goods. This would be a huge deal for GT. In fact, it would comprise 80% of their business upon successful completion. Let's just take a moment and think about this. What is optical sapphire? Well, it's not this. These are gemstones. These are naturally occurring in the earth. A lot of impurities, imperfections, nothing that can be used in an industrial basis. Optical, industrial, artificial sapphire is more like this. Incredibly clear, incredibly strong, incredibly scratch resistant. This material is what is used in lasers, advanced scientific equipment, as well as Apple products today. The screen on an Apple Watch could be made out of sapphire. The lens cover on the back of your iPhone, sapphire. But never before has Apple turned to a company to produce such a large piece of sapphire to cover the face of their phones. It turns out it wasn't such a good idea after all. GT produced sapphire that did not meet Apple's specifications. This resulted in Apple holding back the final payment of that proposed over $500 million. And they did not use those sapphire displays for their iPhone. In fact, they had to go hat in hand to Corning, the supplier of the Gorilla Glass, to produce the faces for the next iPhone 6. This resulted in cost increases, not just in the loss of the business that they paid for the business to GT Technologies. They also had to pay increased prices for that Gorilla Glass, considering they only had months until the product's release. To Apple, losing $500 million on a deal may not be such a big deal when you're sitting on a war chest in the tens or hundreds of billions. But to GT Advanced Technologies, Well, we saw bankruptcy, layoffs of over 900 people, almost 900 people, and Sapphire inventories previously valued at nearly $1 billion, completely worthless. Those Sapphire screens were developed specifically for the iPhone. When Apple turned their back, there was nowhere else for those to go. There are other companies and other industries that have had similar events based on single source supply and the risks inherent thereof. In 2011, there was a tremendous flood in Thailand. How this impacted the hard drive industry, it's surreal. Western Digital, Seagate, the two major hard drive manufacturers, have their largest plants in Thailand. This one right here, this is Western Digital's plant. Notice the water, the boat, looks great for swimming, not for making hard drives. This resulted in a near global collapse of the hard drive supply. Existing inventories, prices shot up. Companies that use hard drives, such as computer manufacturers or retailers such as Best Buy, were scrambling to get whatever supply they could get their hands on. Best Buy's shelves were empty throughout this period. This had a huge impact because supply wasn't just limited to one company. There were several companies involved, but the entire industry was centered in Thailand. And when one event, one flood, caused a disruption in the global supply chain for an entire industry, huge consequences across the board. Now, Apple, clearly they're not stupid. They've worked with many companies using this style of capacity purchase and product development in the past successfully. For example, TSMC. This company helps develop and manufacture the A-series system on a chip that you find within every iPhone and iPad today. They have been keeping up with demand. They have been matching the quality that Apple asks for. In fact, their current deal runs until 2020, but Apple is likely to continue that deal for the foreseeable future, so long as TSMC can meet demand. They are the only foundry that Apple has found thus far that can meet the requirements set in front of them. But that also means they are the only foundry that can meet those demands. Should something happen with TSMC, where is Apple going to go? This is an amazing quote spoken by John Munro of Gartner in regards to the 2011 floods in Thailand. And I quote, "Surely, one of the inevitable impacts of this is that never again will so much be concentrated in so few places." Never again is not a very long time. This was spoken in 2011, the deal with GT Advanced Technology, fall of 2013. Not 2 years later did Apple fall into a deal that ended up being completely and utterly unsuccessful, based on not a similar weather circumstance, but a concentration of supply in one spot, one company. So our recommendations moving forward. One, when Apple is going to be working with a prospective supplier, run trials. Ensure that they can meet demand and quality prior to going into a long-term deal. Monitor those suppliers closely once the deal is in effect. Ensure that Apple's product roadmap, planned years in advance, doesn't get derailed by poor quality or missed deadlines. Finally, diversify suppliers a little bit. Single source may be great for privacy, but it's not very good if that source fails to deliver. Apple should strongly consider working with multiple suppliers to produce these components that are critical for their devices. And with that, I say thank you on behalf of Alan, Ashley, Kevin, Nathaniel, and myself. Have a wonderful weekend, quarter, and a great rest of your summer.